The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Treasurer Falwell calling the 1:30 p.m. May 3rd North Carolina Local Government Commission meeting to order. Thank you all for attending us both in person and virtually. With that, I'll ask Cindy to call the roll to determine the quorum.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. Is Auditor Wood still virtual or is she coming in?
Auditor Wood, have you called in?
Okay, we'll come back. Secretary Marshall. Here. Okay. And Secretary Penny. Okay. All right, we'll come back and get a voice. Mr. Burns?
Here.
Oh, right next to me. Thank you. Mr. Butler? Mr. Butler, say here or present. Make sure you're.
You're muted, Mr.
I want
Butler.
to make sure we can hear you.
Yeah, here.
There we go. Thank you, sir. Ms. Harvey?
Here.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Hoffman?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Here.
And Treasurer Falwell?
Here.
And one more time for Secretary Penny. And Auditor Wood? If they join, we will note their time, but you have a quorum. And quickly do the staff. So in the room present are Sharon Edmondson, Louis Andrews, Jennifer Wimmer, Debbie Tomasco, myself, Cindy Aiken, Victoria Bledsoe. We have Vic D'Amato with DEQ joining us today, and one of our staff observers, Alex Buroff. And one more time, Auditor Wood or Secretary Penny.
Ron Penny's here. I've been hearing you all, but evidently you can't hear me.
All right, we do now. Thank you, sir. All right. Okay.
Thank you. If you'll stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then Secretary Marshall will lead us to the toast of the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I
salute the flag of North Carolina
and pledge
to the old North State, love, loyalty, and faith.
Thank you all. Members, as we go through our agenda, without objection, we will adjourn our meeting today in honor of Carolyn Coleman, who was a lifelong county commissioner from Guilford County who passed away. And those of you who get the County Compass, County Quarterly from the County Commissioner Association, there's a profile of her in there. And also, there's going to be a discussion about what our schedule looks like over the fall so that you can plan our doing some remote LGC meetings, one in the east in Terrell County and one in the west in Western Carolina. And then later on, there'll be a little deeper discussion regarding Bible utility reserves and some of these terms that, starting with me, that sometimes confuse in my mind. And so we're going to have this little tutorial about what some of those terms mean so as to make our meetings more efficient going forward. With that, I'll ask Cindy to tell us if we have any new meeting procedures or housekeeping items.
I have no new meeting procedures or housekeeping items.
Thank you.
Same old, same old.
All right. Thank you. Victoria and others, thank you for driving today. And members, please take a moment to review the closed agenda. Does anyone have an actual potential or the appearance of a conflict of interest regarding any matters that are before us? Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Chairman, this is Vita Harvey. I have a potential conflict with the Johnson and Wales matter. My husband is a partner of a firm that's representing Johnson and Wales.
We'll just have you abstain from that one if that's okay.
That's fine.
Thank you. Any others?
Mr. Chairman, Dublin and East Arcadia are in Bladen County, though I know nothing of or anyone involved in those projects.
So noted. Thank you. Any others? All right. Hearing none, without objection, we'll consider anybody who makes a motion or a second to be considered a yes vote for speed purposes. Do I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes of April 5th and April 26th of 2022?
I so move. Butler.
Second, Hoffman.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hoffman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Minutes approval, motion Butler, second Hoffman. Secretary Marshall? Aye. Secretary Penny?
Aye.
Thanks. Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Ms. Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
And Treasurer Falwell?
Aye.
Any Auditor Wood pop up yet? Not yet, okay.
Mrs. Harvey, did you want to be on the Charlotte City Council? I just want to.
No, thank you. I'll take a hard pass on that.
Sorry about
Right answer. So, okay. Thank you for approving that. I'll now turn the meeting over to Sharon to discuss our FPS response items, which will be taken individually. You will not muting your phone. And if Alter Wood walks in right now, we'll know what that was all about. So, Sharon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Treasurer. Before we get into the FDIC items, which I will be handling all of those in Susan's absence today, I do want to talk briefly about the LGC meetings in the fall. The meeting in September will be held on September 22nd, which is not our normal meeting day. And as the Treasurer said, it will be in the eastern part of the state at the Eastern 4-H Center outside of Columbia, North Carolina, in Terrell County. It's a beautiful location, and I think it will meet our needs quite well.
September 22nd.
Yes, sir. I believe that's a Thursday. And then also the November meeting will be held at the regularly scheduled day and time, November 1st at 1:30. That one will be held at Western Carolina University in Cullowhee. So more details will be forthcoming as we work them out, but we wanted to make sure that you had that information handy for scheduling purposes going forward.
I'm afraid I'm going to be in a evidentiary hearing at the Utilities Commission the week of September 22nd. So if that falls through, I'll be glad to join y'all. But okay.
We'll have remote capability out there.
We will. It'll be similar to the way we do it now. It'll be hybrid version. Those of you that want to join in person are more than welcome to do so. And if you want to call in or remote in, that also will be an option.
I've already booked all the Econo Lodge rooms for that night, so might need to make arrangements somewhere else.
Stay at the 4-H Center. Stay at the 4-H
I
Center.
know, that's fine. That's what we're working on. But I appreciate Secretary Marshall just said, I've been talking to Kevin Howell about this for about a year. We've been talking to the Chancellor of North Carolina State about this, as well as Chairman Everett, the county commissioners of that county, and they are super excited for Raleigh to come to them. So thank you, staff, for whatever you have to do to make this happen. Okay.
All right, moving on then to the FPIC items.
Mention the Western Carolina students.
One of the reasons we're holding the meeting at Western when we are is that they would very much like to involve their MPA students, either in the meeting directly or possibly having a Q&A with them before or after. We haven't worked out all the details yet. They're very interested in having their students interact with us. Haven't been an MPA student at one point in my life. I think I'm looking forward to that conversation.
And we'll be recruiting.
Yes. We'll be actively looking for employees.
All right, sorry.
Need to invite the accounting students too. Okay, moving on then to City of New Bern. So New Bern is seeking approval of $3.9 million installment purchase to construct and install an elevator in the City Hall Annex building. They are not anticipating a tax increase to make the debt service payments. Truist is the proposed lender. Their interest rate is 2.86% for a 15-year term. They did get notification of financial performance indicators of concern and have responded to those. First one of those is that their audit was late. It did not come in until January 20th of 2022, when it was due October 31st of 2021. And they also reported deficits in seven different FEMA and grant-related funds at June 30th, 2021. As I said, the city did respond, and we found the response to be satisfactory. They've had significant turnover in the finance department. They've had and hired and lost, I believe, 2 finance officers in the last 18 months. But they have since recruited a new finance officer and some additional finance staff, and also hired a grant accountant. That's a new position for them, I believe. And the current finance officer has said that if the grants are not funded by June 30th of 2022, she will make the proper accounting entries to get those funded from the general fund. But often with grant funds, it's a timing issue. Any of those deficits may just clear themselves by the end of the year.
I was in New Bern yesterday and met the outgoing mayor, and I'm not sure how contested race it is, but other people who are running for mayor, so they'll thank you for pointing this out to us.
And, we have on the phone Foster Hughes, the city manager, Kim Ostrom, the director of finance, and Helen Stevens, the accounting manager. If anybody has questions for any of those folks.
New Bern staff, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. This is Kimberly Ostrom, the finance director, and Helen Stevens, the accounting manager.
Thank you for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to add to what Sharon Edmondson, the report she gave on behalf of Susan McCullen?
Sure. She actually reported exactly what I was planning on doing, but I just wanted to add that we have further this year have closed out several FEMA projects in anticipating on closing out a couple more, as well as we've streamlined our processes and implemented new policies to strengthen our internal controls as well. So we are reconciling on a regular basis. We're almost fully staffed. We have one position that's open, and that's due to a promotion. We've been requesting reimbursements on a monthly basis from our grant funding agencies as well as FEMA. So we're in a pretty good position, and we do not anticipate having negative fund balances at the end of fiscal year 22.
The negative fund balances are for enterprise funds or the whole city?
They were for the project funds, which were FEMA and grant funds. So basically what happened is at the end of the year, because we had, I believe, about 6 vacant positions leading up to audit, and we had just significant turnover in spring and summer, staff did not request reimbursement at the end of the year. We did not budget for any transfers from general fund to cover those negative fund balances. So it just was really due to staff turnover and being just a backlog of work.
Okay.
And so now we're all, thank you.
Go ahead. Any questions from the LGC members? I did bring $9,000 down to your convention center yesterday. They were sitting in NC cash, so you might want to check that account for the city.
Thank you.
City of New Bern. So,
Thank you. I will.
any questions from staff? Any questions from members? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to take staff's recommendation to approve?
Move approval.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
For the city of New Bern, motion Marshall, second Burns. Auditor Wood? Aye. By the way, Auditor Wood, if you're on the phone, arrived about 5 minutes ago. Secretary Penny?
Aye.
Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Thanks. Councilwoman Hoffman?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Treasurer Falwell?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, New Bern, and those of you who travel that area this spring or summer, there's a great Italian restaurant down there called Castiglia's, and very reasonably priced. I wouldn't be there if it weren't, but it's great food. So I highly recommend it. Really Italian food. So thank you. Next, Rockingham County.
All right, the next item up for discussion is Rockingham County. They are asking for approval of $21,160,000 installment purchase contract to construct a workforce development center at the Rockingham Community College. No tax increases anticipated to service this debt. They are proposing borrowing through Truist Bank at an interest rate of 2.25% with a 15-year term. They also received financial performance indicators of concern that we asked them to address. The first is they had an operating net loss in their water sewer fund after excluding depreciation and adding back debt service principal. They reported that they had a transaction included in that number that dealt with a refunded debt payoff. But even after you take that into consideration, it's still a negative $268,000. They also had transfers in from the general fund to support the water sewer fund of more than 3%. The county's been working over the last several years to reduce their dependence on the general fund, and they included a graph in their response that shows how that amount's been going down. In an effort to control or reduce operating costs, they've hired a third-party service provider in late 2021, fiscal year 2021. So we won't see the full effects of that until the 2022 fiscal year. They also anticipate growth over the next several fiscal years that will increase their revenues. We believe the response to be satisfactory. And we have on the phone Lance Metzler, the county manager, Pat Galloway, the finance director, and either Ted Cole or Mitch Bruglio from Davenport, their financial advisors.
Rockingham County, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Rockingham?
Yes, we can hear you.
I heard the name Pat Galloway, and I got confused with Pat Goddard, who I worked with a lot in the past. So anything you'd like to add to what Sharon, the report that Sharon just gave on behalf of Rockingham County?
No, that was a very thorough explanation of what we had provided.
Thank you. Just a personal question. When you talk about workforce development, is any of this space going to be subleased or leased back to the Division of Employment Security or the state? Are you going to be able to get any revenue off of any partnership that could come from that?
No, there is no plan to lease the space out. It will be used strictly by the community college for their programs and workforce development activities.
So no DWS offices there then? Division of Workforce Solutions.
Not that we're aware of at this time, no.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you for joining us. Do I hear a motion to take staff's recommendation? Absolutely.
Hi, this is John Burns. I just have you forecast growth in your community that will add customers to the water system, and you show the anticipated revenue projections. Have you also calculated anticipated costs for those expansions and that your system might incur because of them?
For the expansions?
You're talking about the cost to operate it, or?
Yeah, I don't know if there would be any costs, and if there are, have you taken them into account when you calculate your anticipated revenues from that growth?
That cost was taken in consideration when we did the service contract for 2021. We had them project the cost as we added customers. So all that has been part of our calculations.
Okay, thank you.
I have several questions.
Alderman Wood.
So this is a question for staff. You're saying that the county's response is satisfactory, but I'm looking at the loss, excluding depreciation. Even when you take out the $1,221,000, they're at 268 negative. So they reduced it in 2020, but it's back up in 2021. So help me understand why their response is satisfactory. And I get that the debt will be paid out of the general fund, right? Yes, that's the general fund type debt. Okay, but the general fund is holding up the water and sewer fund right now. So again, I'm trying to understand. They don't seem to have their arms around their expenditures. They're still in the negative, even when they, take out that 1.2 million. I'm not sure I'm in agreement that their response was satisfactory. I don't see any real help. I know they got some anticipated revenues, but that's anticipated revenues.
Madam Auditor, they also have declining debt service in the water sewer fund. And as a result, they are reducing their transfers from the general fund. As far as why the loss went up in 21 as opposed to what was there in 2020, I would have to ask the county rather to respond to that. Pat, do you have a good explanation as to why the loss increased in 2021?
We've had a project that came through that fund, initially funded through county dollars, but then we were able to fund that back, move that back to general fund and fund it through some other grant revenues that were available. So that may have impacted the loss that we saw. That we've had some transactions like that. They're one-off transactions that are not normal, just day-to-day operating costs.
Could you repeat that again? It came through kind of muffled.
During that time frame, we've had some one-off projects where we've moved, done some one-off projects with Water Fund that we ended up being able to secure grant funds to pay for that and reimburse it back. So that may have impacted the loss.
So the reimbursement came in a different fiscal year?
Yes. When grant funds became available, we transferred the funds back to the general fund. So the project happened in one year. We reimbursed the general fund for that a different year.
That doesn't explain it. That doesn't explain.
And we're not moving the ball forward regarding the state auditor's questions. So would you like to expand on it, or would you like for her to ask it again?
any additional information ready at this time to explain that.
And then when they say they've hired a third-party service provider, what is that?
My understanding is they've hired a company to operate their water sewer system on behalf of the county, rather than county employees. And Pat, please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
That's correct. We've contracted out the operation and maintenance of the system to a third-party contractor who can do it less expensive than we can with internal staff.
And who is that third-party contractor?
Environment.
EnviroLink.
Let's say. Environment. Okay.
How time loses. I mean, they break the ground. Can- Pat, Susan's not here today, so can you kind of give us a brief explanation of the timeliness of this approval today?
For the local government commission to approve.
Yeah, I mean, as far as where you are in Rockingham County on this issue project,
On this community college project, we are set to close on the debt this week. We have the interest rate is being held by Truist until the first of next week for us to close on this. So we'll anticipate a higher interest rate if we are not able to close this week. So getting LGC approval today is critical for us to be able to hold that rate and bring this project in as least interest cost as possible. The community college does have the bids in hand, so we need to be able to award the bids as well.
I think we're going to do this.
The partnership or relationship with EnviroLink, is that something that was the your last choice or your first choice?
It was our first choice.
Maybe it's just the connection, but I don't find your answers to be very forthcoming or comforting.
It was our first choice. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. How much research was done on EnviroLink?
This is Lance Messer, the county manager. So what we did is we were operating internally, and so we went out for bid. I think we got in 3 or 4 bids, ranging from $600,000 a year to a little over $100,000 a year. So we selected EnviroLink based on the references that we checked, that my staff checked.
And how comfortable are you that there's not going to be a bunch of changes to the contract, that things they didn't anticipate? That's a big difference. 100, 600.
I'm sorry. I'm very comfortable. We've been working with them this year. We've had some really good interactions with them. We feel very comfortable with EnviroLink. Matter of fact, we made a recommendation today to another municipality that called about a reference with them.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And just Lance, just tell us what the economics of that RFP. If you've ever gone out for an RFP before, and what led to you doing it, and then what's the net present value back to the taxpayers, just generally speaking.
This is the first time that we've gone out. Typically, the county did the water and sewer ourselves, and we decided that the private sector could do it a lot more efficient. So we tested that. We did the RFP process. We went through it. We hired EnviroLink, and it seems to be working out extremely well. The net present value back to the citizens is the fact that we are saving money by operating with the private sector versus doing it ourselves. We're in the water sewer collections and distribution. We don't own our own system, so we have to work with Madison, the city of Madison, and the city of Mayodan for their water and sewer plants. So we're strictly with distribution and collections.
Okay. And who does the distribution and collections for Madison Mayodan?
Mayodan is sewer and Madison's water. And just to add, if I could, as far as the speculation of growth, we are growing in the southwestern part of the county. We're using most of our ARPA funds for water and sewer expansion for the growth that we're handling out there. So we hope to minimize any future debt by using our ARPA funds for the water and sewer upgrades expansion.
Lance, it may seem a little bit of a sidebar, but I think there's a big development that there's a lot of talk about in northeast Guilford County that is trying to possibly partner with your water and sewer system. Is that any of that sound accurate?
I have heard that. To date, nobody has approached me about that. And typically the process is they come to the county manager first, and then if I think it's valid, I would take it to the commissioners, but I've not been approached yet.
Okay. So none of the economics we're looking at right now incorporates any of that?
Not in Guilford County, no, sir.
No, in Rockingham County.
Oh, we're anticipating the growth in Rockingham County, yes, sir. We've got almost 2,000 homes that either are committed or that will be committed.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is supposedly these are homes in Guilford County, but they were trying to tap into your water and sewer system.
Yes, sir. I've been told that that project was interested in getting infrastructure from Rockingham County, but again, they have not come to the county yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I asked for a motion in a second. Okay. Do I hear a motion in a second to accept staff's recommendation on Rockingham County?
May I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I know nothing about this company that you all are mentioning. That seems to be one of the questions and hangups on this discussion, and this potential vote.
Yes, you have heard it. It's where the former town manager / finance officer / personnel of Robesonville went to work.
Well,
But she
no,
got
I
fired.
didn't know that.
Yeah, maybe you weren't in the closed session, we talked about that. But it's where she's working now. And trying to drive some business. And again, I'm real concerned with the difference between 100,000 and 600,000. I'm afraid you're lowballed it.
If I may, so the one with 600,000, they're a firm out of Florida. I feel very comfortable with the numbers Environment has given us. I mean, I don't see any reason why we should doubt that. I mean, they've provided great services so far. Again, we've just begun our relationship with them with this past year, so they seem to be doing a great job for us. Again, it's not a collection and distribution system. It's not a water plant or a sewer plant.
And Lance, this is the treasurer. So you're starting this process to outsource this, for lack of a better word. If for some reason you decide this is not the best interest going forward, how long is this contract for? Then how would you recreate the chassis that you currently have?
It's 3 years. So we've got staff internally. We didn't hire another position in our public works department. So we absorbed the person who was over that in our public works department. But if something goes awry with the existing contract with Environment, we could easily go back to having this individual service our system. Again, it's a smaller system.
Okay. So systemically, you don't feel like you're vulnerable from that respect? Okay.
No, sir.
And last question, a little bit of a sidebar of the relationship between you and the school system regarding their finances and their capital needs and their funding. How would you describe that relationship right now as far as what may produce more pressure on Rockingham County's budget?
Can you repeat that, sir?
Yeah, all counties obviously have a close working relationship with the school systems. And I would just ask for you to summarize for the commission the relation. How do you characterize the relationship that the county currently has with the Rockingham County school system in relation to any future financial demands that could be placed on the county based on that relationship?
I think we have in my opinion, we have a good working relationship with the schools. I know that our commissioners have formed a committee or a subcommittee with the school board members. We have, I think, 2 from the school board members, 2 from our commissioners have formed a committee to evaluate the future growth and demands on the schools. I know right now, like I said earlier, we have a high demand or high growth or potential growth in the western part of the county. And so they're trying to best determine the solutions. We've got an older school in Reedsville, South End. They're trying to find the best strategies to accomplish the replacing that. So I think that our relationship is good. Matter of fact, the board just approved some of those restricted funds last night, approximately $1.5 million for a variety of different projects. Periodically, they come for certain needs, and the board or commissioners are amenable to listening to what those needs are.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, do I hear a motion or a second? Last call.
Seems like there are some questions that we'd like additional answers to. Maybe move to set this aside to a later date until those questions are answered. I'm sorry. Did they say that if it doesn't go through now, then they lose their interest rate? Is that the issue?
Yes, sir.
Been there.
So it's 2.25 now. The odds of it saying 2.25 are slim and none.
Alder Wood.
Sure. Feeling really good about where they're headed and what they're doing and all the numbers and that they're gonna.
I'm comfortable with the general fund. I think it's important to do. And they're reducing the lines.
Sorry, could you say that?
I'm sorry, I'm comfortable that the general fund can support the debt and that they are reducing their reliance on general fund in the water sewer fund.
Wasn't it in the 2021 that they were more than 3%? They moved more than 3% from the general fund to the water sewer? What audit am I talking about? This is 2021. Yeah.
Rockingham County, we're sort of talking amongst ourselves. Susan's not here today and Sharon's pinch hitting, so just bear with us a minute, okay?
I mean, so 2020, the transfer was $1.2 million. In 2021, it was $567,000.
Okay, so the move, but they still missed 3%.
Yes, they still missed 3%.
They went way over the threshold.
It's declining. Yes, it still exceeds 3%.
So we'll keep letting them break the law.
That's not illegal.
The guideline or
It's a guideline.
LGC rule?
And that's 3% of the sewer and water budget, not of the county's general fund.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Secretary, if I may, the funds to pay for this debt is coming from our sales tax, and it's a dedicated amount that's going strictly towards the Workforce Development Center.
Is that a term of the borrowing? Sharon?
That they legally dedicated sales tax. Yeah.
So it is a term of that, of the loan. Okay.
We had the quarter cent sales tax passed in May of 2018, and the commissioners have dedicated 100% of that to the community college for the Workforce Development Center. And right now,
we're
Yes, ma'am. And in 2023, we're estimating roughly $3 million for sales tax. And as you can see, the debt payments, do they have the debt payments?
Yes. So if the general fund gets worse, it goes under whatever, that money's still got to go to pay this debt. Right. Okay.
So, once again, do I hear a motion to take staff's recommendation?
So moved.
I'll say.
Motion by Secretary Marshall, second by Mr. Burns. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Rockingham County installment contract matter, Marshall Burns, Auditor Wood.
Aye.
Secretary Penny,
Aye.
thank you. Mr. Butler,
You're on mute.
I think there's a delay.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Harvey,
Aye.
Councilwoman Hoffman,
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck,
Aye.
and Treasurer Pollard.
Aye. Okay, Rockingham County, you're all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Waynesville.
Yes, the last FPIC item is the city of Waynesville for $1.9 million. Again, an installment purchase arrangement. They have three different things they're doing with the funds: reimbursing themselves for the purchase of land at the fire station, purchase of a tanker fire truck, and refinancing an existing debt on public works building improvements. Increase in sales tax revenue is what they're planning to use to offset the increase in debt services. No tax increase anticipated. The lender is JP Morgan Chase. The approval interest rate is 2.01% for the new money and 2% for the refinancing, with a term of 15 years for the new money and 9 years for the refinance. And on the phone, we have Misty Haygood, Finance Director.
Hey, Misty, how are you? Hey, Misty, can you hear us? Staff's recommending.
Staff recommendation for approval. I'm sorry, I didn't go over the FPIC items. I'm not in the habit of doing this. So Waynesville had a late audit, and they also had two statutory violations. One was failure to escheat old outstanding checks, and then they missed their daily deposit on several occasions during the fiscal year. The audit was delayed because the finance officer resigned suddenly in September of 2021, just as they were preparing the audit, and they hired a retired finance officer to help get everything closed out and get the audit done. It was turned in January of 2022. They have since hired a full-time finance officer and do not anticipate any delays in the 2022 audit. Also, the new finance officer has addressed both the violations that were noted by the auditor, and they do not expect any recurrence.
Do I hear a motion to accept staff's recommendation?
State auditor, so moved.
Second? Do I hear a second?
Second, Mike Philbeck.
Second, Ms. Harvey.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Okay, for Waynesville, that's motion Wood, second Philbeck, Secretary Marshall.
Aye.
Thank you. Secretary Penny,
Aye.
Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Mr. Butler. Thank you. I think I heard an aye. Mrs. Harvey.
Aye.
Thanks. Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
And Treasurer Falwell?
Aye. Before we go in our consent agenda, just, I'm sure Rockingham County's already signed off, but they have $70 million of unfunded healthcare liability in Rockingham County and nearly $8 billion of unfunded pension liability. So we have these numbers for every county and city that's before us, so that's a big issue. And as we go into consent agenda, just a tip of the hat to Charlotte, who's on our agenda today. $350 million of OPEB liability. They have $160 million in the bank, which is fantastic. They've cut their liability about in half, and their total pension liability is about $172 million. And Raleigh has $250 million healthcare OPEB liability, 70 million funded for 190, and on the pension side, another 134 million for about half of that's funded for about 70 million of unfunded. And Wake's not on our agenda today, but I'm trying to. We have a meeting scheduled with Zig, the chair of the county commission, to talk about Wake County's unfunded pension and healthcare liability, which I think are over $500 million. And ways that they can, in this budget this year, probably start putting some money toward that. So I just wanted to provide you with these numbers as we move forward. And obviously with healthcare costs doing what they're doing, these unfunded healthcare liabilities are going to continue to grow. So thank you for listening to all that. With that, we have a consent agenda that goes from Cabarrus County through Washington. Does any member desire to have any one of those pulled off for an individual vote?
I believe Johnson and Wells has to be pulled off.
Would you read on that?
We have a conflict.
Washington. All right.
That's right, Secretary Penny.
Through Wilmington Housing Authority, and Secretary Penny, repeat your comment, please.
Johnson and Wells has to be pulled off because we have a member with conflict.
Yes.
And that was the conflict I mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. So do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda from Cabarrus County through the Wilmington Housing Authority, not including Johnson and Wells?
Good. Sorry.
Awesome.
Sorry. Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, that's fine. Keep going.
All right. Thank you. Second.
Arderwood.
And second being heard. Any further discussion? Cindy.
Yes, I'm sorry. Just to be clear, those last two items, Onslow County and Wilmington Housing Authority, are non-action, so there's nothing to vote on for those.
Right.
So that's why I had said through Washington, but that's okay.
Any,
Okay, so Johnson and Wales will be a separate vote after this.
Correct.
Got it.
any further discussion? The clerk will call the roll.
All right. So for the consent agenda, begin with Cabarrus County, and the voting items go through Washington, Hoffman, and Wood. All right. Secretary Marshall. Aye. Secretary Penny.
Aye.
Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Thanks. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck
Aye.
and Treasurer Falwell.
Aye. Members, before we go to Johnson and Wells, I just want to remind you that I and the local government and the staff has been responding to some public records requests regarding the use of public money to electioneer regarding some bond referenda. And I'm just saying this as an admonition. I'm always in favor of voter-approved debt. I'm always against breaking the law regarding the use of money out of bond referendum for electioneering purposes. So I'm just saying that in case anybody's on the line, that there's just a lot more people looking at what those laws say and how they're being applied and complied. Excuse me. So I just want to say that. Next, we have Johnson and Wales. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I so moved.
Second. And Mr. Butler, Mr. Burns, any further discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is a Cinderella structure?
A Cinderella structure is when it's taxable up front because you can't legally go forward with a tax exempt bond, but a refunding because the federal tax law in 2016 made advance refund legal, tax exempt advance refunding. So it's a bridge to the you get the out to the 90 days in front of the call date. So they do the taxable bond and then they transfer do a transition to the tax exempt bond.
What's it called? Cinderella?
And the reason they want to do that is because they can lock the rate in early. They can lock the rate in on the tax, yeah, on the future taxes. That's why they want to do it.
And what year was that law changed?
2016 federal tax law. I forget the name of it,
That
but
allows this.
yeah.
But when was it changed? Back in the day, about 25 years ago. So what people were doing is they were issuing bonds at tax-free rates and investing in government bonds and making and arbitraging, right?
That's right. That changed in 2016 of the advance refundings for legal up to 2016, and now you can only do current refunding, tax exempt.
Okay.
So that's the reason we want to lock in the rate.
Sounds like the way you describe it, that's the appropriate word for it. Cinderella. All right.
If I can make a comment,
Yes.
I very much fear that this business of lack of students, since the population numbers are declining, a lot of our universities are facing the fact that they are built to a certain capacity and are not now getting the students just because the birth rate is not there. We've reached a precipice, and University of North Carolina is spending a whole lot of money on the system, and I'm very familiar with what's going on at Campbell in the same regard. So there may be a number of these institutions that are going to be doing some refinancing out of necessity.
Secretary Marshall, I agree with you, and we're seeing this also in the public school system. We have 25% of the K-12 students now who are not participating in public school, at least, assuming the data is correct. But the appetite for infrastructure and all, as you just mentioned, continues to not sort of take that into account.
Well, keeping up infrastructure is more expensive as each day goes.
Yeah. So, okay. We have a motion?
Yeah.
Second. And any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Okay. For Johnson and Wales University, motion Butler, second Burns. Auditor Wood. Aye. Secretary Marshall. Aye. Secretary Penny.
Aye.
Thank you. And Ms. Harvey is recusing. Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Treasurer Folwell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Do we still need to have Sharon review the non-action items with Onslow and Wilmington?
Yes, we typically just let you know.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
So we do have the two non-action items, and I apologize for that. Onslow County has negotiated rate modification with PNC on some existing privately held tax exempt installment purchase debt. They have negotiated from 2.56 down to 1.56 on this loan, and it will save them almost $39,000 when it matures in 2025.
Okay.
The Wilmington Housing Authority, they had some debt that was approved by the LDC back in 2019. It was 3 different series of tax exempt bonds and taxable bonds. And it was a private placement. The C-Series bonds were set up with short maturity and are intended to be paid off once the project is stabilized. The 19 A and B series both have longer maturities, and we approved all of this with a not to exceed maturity of 2061. The bondholder and the borrower are asking for an extension on the stabilization date for approximately 6 to 12 months, with 6 months for the 2019 C bonds, mainly because the rehab on the project is mostly complete, with the developer finalizing several outstanding items, which is why they're asking for the extension. This will be the only change in the terms for the 2019 C A4 B bonds.
Any questions about that? Next on the agenda. All right, now we're going to our non-action items, which is attachment B in your material. And I'd like to know if there's any objection to us voting on those as a group, or would you like to take those votes individually? Those that need votes. Hearing no objection, we'll chair rules and we'll take them all in one vote. So with that, we'll go to our updates.
So for, again, this is attachment B. For East Laurinburg, there is an update, no action items required, and I'm not going to take the time to go through the updates. Eureka, again, just an update with no action, and same with Cliffside Sanitary District. Robertsonville, you have the update attached, and we also have several items that need a vote for Robertsonville. We have a policy resolution to dispose of personal property and a budget amendment. For Pikeville, you have included an update, and we have 3 action items there. A Pikeville policy resolution to dispose of personal property, same thing we have in Robertsonville. A budget amendment for the water fund, and a budget amendment for the electric fund. In Kingstown, you have an update and an action item of a budget amendment for the sewer fund. And finally, in Spring Lake, you have an update and a vote needed to adopt a resolution to accept their ARPA funds. Any questions about any of the action items?
Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the attachment B? As far as the unit updates, those that require votes, do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved, Arderwood.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Penny.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Today, as I was coming westbound, I stopped by Global Transport, but also Pikeville. We are very optimistic that Pikeville's in the 8th inning as far as getting control of their finances back. We're obviously thinking about June 30th. It may be a month or two after that. But I want to let you know what really happens in some of these small communities. I did not have an appointment. When I stopped by City Hall at Pikeville, the city manager was not available because he was out working the garbage truck, because the person who works the garbage truck was not there that day. When I went to the garbage truck, he wasn't at the garbage truck because he's a volunteer fireman, and there's a car that caught on fire on 795. And so I finally caught up with the city manager of Pikeville, not on the garbage, not at City Hall, not on the garbage truck, but actually at the volunteer fire department. He and the mayor both were on that volunteer fire call, and it's just an example of how many different hats some of these folks in these small communities have to wear. And I just wanted y'all to know that. I mean, this really happened this morning. I completely they had no idea that I was going to be showing up, but it was very, very heartwarming. So I I just want to say something very positive about Pikeville because of all the criticism we sometimes receive about our working with some of these communities. And the mayor could not have been more appreciative. I think he got elected about the time we took Pikeville over. And he was so thankful once he learned how involved and what a positive impact we can have on his new tenure as mayor. So thank you, staff. Thanking you on his behalf. So did I call the roll?
Did not.
Okay. Clerk, call the roll.
All right. This is vote on, for Robertsonville, the policy surplus property resolution and the budget amendment. Pikeville, the policy resolution for the property and 2 budget amendments. Kingstown, 1 budget amendment, and Spring Lake resolution to accept ARPA funds. Wood motion, Penny second. Secretary Marshall. Aye. Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Thanks. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
And Treasurer Falwell.
Aye. Now to turn it over for resolutions and budget amendments. Thank you.
23.
Now to turn the conversation back to Sharon to have a discussion about viable utility reserve action items.
Right, attachment C in your packet is a resolution converting SRF loans to UR grants. We approved several of these last month, and there may be a few more next month, but this is the bulk of them in this particular request. The motion is to convert SRF loans for these individual units to VUR grants. They would be subject to all the requirements of VUR grants. And these are expenditure reimbursed grants, so they are not being handed the cash up front. This is a good combination, I think, of units that had already appeared before the LGC and had their SRF loan approved, and units that have not had the loans approved yet. The ones that had the loans approved, actually all of them, none of the work has started yet, which is why we do have the ability to convert these from SRFs to VUR grants.
Okay.
And
Question.
Victor Demand from TEQ is here. If you have any questions for me or
Welcome, Victor. You need to start showing up to the good popcorn start coming. Thanks, man. Get that popcorn. Oh, it's the good stuff. Anyway, Mr. Burns.
Bipartisan agreement there, Mr. Treasurer. That stuff is excellent. I just have a quick question, just so I understand. Is there really any real difference from our perspective in approving the grant where the loan has been approved by us and where the loan has not yet been approved on this chart? What are we being asked to do in the event that the loan is not yet been approved?
Something that we wouldn't be asked to do if they had just applied for a VUR grant and had never gone through the SRF process.
Okay. So it's just basically converting it to a grant by our vote? Okay. I think I understand the presentation 2 months ago, but it's been a
We had
while.
already voted on this earlier this month.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Burns, I believe there was a question at a previous meeting whether or not some of these had come before the commission. So I believe that's why DEQ staff included that in their notes, just to let commission members and others know whether or not this had actually come before the commission before.
Thank you. I'm sure you addressed that 2 months ago, and it's gone in one ear and out the other, so I just wanted to ask that question.
Okay. We'll now vote on these resolutions to convert the SRF loans to VUR grants. Do I hear a motion?
Move approval.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? Thank you,
Second,
Secretary
Hoffman.
Marshall. Any further discussion?
Mr. Treasurer,
Yes, sir.
this total back here of nearly $33 million, how much more is left in this wasn't there approximately $500 million in this fund when we first started?
Yes, sir. We'll get you an answer on that.
Thank you.
Vic D'Amato, Division of Water Infrastructure. Yeah, after the original appropriation, I think was about 450 million. There was about 80 million, I think, in earmarks, so we were down. And I think, Debbie, you might have done some of these calculations too for your staff report. So we were down to about 350, roughly, give or take. So after this, what was it again? 33. Yeah. Besides, I think you guys have approved the, how much was approved, last time, Debbie? About
That was under 3 million.
so roughly 400 million or 300 million. I'm sorry.
The answer, Mr. Butler, is about 300 million approximately.
That is still available.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are you, Victor, are you confident that that money that's been earmarked or allocated is going to result in one more glass of clean water or one more ability to flush a toilet?
Yeah, I mean, I think for these swap requests, these are projects that have already been vetted. They've already been scored by SWIA, approved, and of course, some have come to y'all for approval of the debt. So they've already been vetted to be good projects.
That's all good, but is it going to result in another glass of clean water?
Or a glass of clean wastewater, yes.
Okay. All right.
Did he say a glass of clean wastewater?
It was a joke. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Glad
I
you
mean,
listened, Paul.
when we located the hog plant in Bladen County, the management said they'd drink the water where the discharge pipe was going into the Cape Fear River. I just wondered if it was going to be that clean.
All right. Well, if my wife were here, she'd throw a couple of puns at you, but she's not. So we'll just continue. We have a motion second, right?
Yes, we do.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
For the Viable Utility Reserve Resolution converting some SRF loans to UR grants. Motion Bern, second Marshall. Auditor Wood.
Aye.
Secretary Penny.
Aye.
Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye. Okay. Now we have 24A on our agenda to turn it over to Debbie, who is going to give us a clear and concise review of the differences between the UAL and the VUR distressed designations. And we're doing this because all commission members go out and remark, I'm sure from time to time, about their role on this commission, and having these terms right in our minds is very, very important for not only transparency, but communication purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. We did just want to briefly touch on questions lately about the intersection between the UAL, the Unit Assistance List, and the VUR distress units. So we just wanted to give you a little bit of background on each, a little bit of purpose, so the distinction is clear. Because again, both are areas where the LGC has a hand in. So we just wanted to clarify and each of those, and then where they intersect. So the UAL, or the Unit Assistance List, is just a tool used and developed by LGC staff to identify units that might be facing some financial or some fiscal management challenges. So in looking at who might be on that list, it could be any of the units subject to the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. And again, it's just a tool by staff to identify those units. There's no statutory authority for it. It's just an internal tool. And again, the units that are on that list are identified by LGC staff. The impact of being on the list is really some additional assistance from our staff. We'll do additional monitoring, additional guidance and support as needed, and that's really the impact of being on that list. If we jump over to these, quote, distressed units, and again, distressed is actually used in the Viable Utility Reserve legislation language. That's a term used in that statute, it's Session Law 2020-79. And under that law, both SWIA, State Water Infrastructure Authority, and the LGC have to identify distressed units under Viable Utility Reserve. And so again, it's a joint effort by both of those agencies to identify distressed units. The impact, if you're designated as a distressed unit, is you have some obligations under statute to fulfill. You have to engage in some training. You have to develop a long-term and short-term action plan, and you have to perform asset and inventory assessment. So there are some very real impacts there for units designated as distressed. And again, those are requirements under statute. So again, the UAL is just an LGC staff tool maintained by LGC staff. The designation of VUR distressed units is a concept under legislation, under the VUR legislation, and that's managed by both the LGC and SWIA. So one of the questions we've gotten is where does the intersection come in? Because people are hearing the word distressed and they're thinking maybe it has to do with the UAL. So there is an intersection. There are two separate lists, like we talked about, but there is an intersection. Units that are late with their audits may appear on the UAL, and they also may be designated as a distressed unit under Viable Utility Reserve legislation. So that's one point they may intersect. They also may intersect if they're on the UAL for internal control issues. They will get points under the assessment under VUR. It'll give them some points towards that assessment score that we're using to determine if the unit is distressed. So although they're separate lists, for lack of a better word, they're separately maintained, separate criteria that are utilized for identifying who's included. There is an intersection, a small intersection between them. So we just wanted to make sure the distinction was clear, and as well as the intersection of those two lists. So,
Were you going to, excuse me, I was just going to clarify on the late audit thing, they have to be missing 2 years of audits. It can't just be that an audit was submitted late. So in order to qualify as distressed, they have to be 2 years behind at the cutoff date, which the cutoff date this year was March 1st. And we had, a handful of units, maybe at 12 or 13, that qualified as distressed under the VUR designation because we are missing the 21 and 20 audits. Sounds like negative reinforcement. Well, there are responsibilities that come along with being distressed. They do have to do the training. They have to do the short and long-term plans, and they have to do the asset assessment and rate study. And they don't come off the list until those things are done. Can you go through the UAL again?
any particular part or just sort of summary from the top?
Again.
So it's LGC staff tool used to identify units that might be having some financial issues or some fiscal management issues. It's, again, our sort of universe of units that we look at would be anyone subject to the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. So that's about 1,100 units. The impact, again, is that we provide some additional resources and monitoring for those units. Right now with the UAL units, we're doing some budget to actual. They're submitting budget to actual reports to us throughout the year, and we're doing some reviews of their budgets, their draft budgets before they're adopted by their governing boards. So they get a little extra support and monitoring from staff, from LGC staff. But again, it's just an internal tool that was developed by our staff almost for a resource to determine which units we needed to have staff assist with.
you want to elaborate on your earlier comment about not the perverseness of it, but something you said a few minutes ago? Yeah, negative, yeah.
When you talk about you give them points for being 2 years, you have to be 2 years late to get points for this distress, and I get distress means, none of this sounds as negative as I think it really is. Distressed units, 2 years behind on their audit report, it sounds like we're helping people that won't help themselves. There you go. That's what I was trying to say. We are helping people that won't help themselves. That's just what it made it sound like. And the UAL, while I know it's a staff tool, it is not a good thing to be on the UAL. That is very much a negative connotation.
So I think we should irrigate this. We should keep running water through it until we get to the, how do we fix this negative reinforcement type of issue? Is that statutory? Is that internal policy? Is that words that we need to start using differently?
And Mr. Treasurer, it's a little bit, I think, maybe of a few things. First of all, the criteria that we use to identify the Viable Utility Reserve legislation tasked both LGC and SWIA with coming up with a means to identify distressed units.
Right.
And both the LGC and SWIA adopted four criteria by which a unit could be designated as distressed. One of those four criteria is being behind, as Sharon said, a very specific distinction. 2 audit reports have not been submitted at all by March 1st. We do that reassessment. We developed again with DWI this assessment plan, and we assess these units every April. So if you're 2 years behind as of March 1st, you may be designated as distressed under one of those 4 criteria. It's criteria 2. So those criteria, Mr. Treasurer, that is an internal policy from the perspective of both the LGC and SWIA adopted those 4 ways that a unit could be identified as distressed as we were directed to under statute. But again, I think as Sharon mentioned too, the designation of distressed means in statute you have those three obligations, and the training, the study, and the long and short-term action planning. Those are automatic. If you're designated as distressed, you have those requirements. From a funding perspective, and Vic can talk more about this too, it's not an automatic grant, essentially. Just because you're designated as distressed doesn't mean you automatically receive money or you have money. What it means right now, at least, is that you're eligible for the funding that was made available through the General Assembly through these ARPA funds. So there is the connection there with distressed as far as the funding has been designated specifically by the General Assembly, correct, for units designated as distressed. So I guess it does allow eligibility, obviously, for those funds, but it doesn't guarantee that those units will get those funds.
And one of the control measures that we have is this short and long-term plan. So essentially for projects that are questionable, which may be, for example, building a new treatment plant, which is basically sinking a lot of funds into a solution, quote, that persists for 20, 30 years, we would want to make sure that there were no lower cost or more viable solutions for that unit. So we have that mechanism within the program by the statutory requirement for the long-term, short-term plans to really have that ironed out, have a financial plan before we go ahead and fund that project.
And I'll add that the grant process is a competitive process.
It is.
There's going to be more requests.
I get that, but still, the worse you manage your assets, the most likely you are to get on the money for this. And then, so I guess I'm fine with helping people because we've got to have clean water, got to have sewage treatment, and all that. But what keeps them? You put all this money into it. That was all fine. What keeps them? Keeping their utilities up to date. That's why they're where they are today, is because they didn't set aside money to keep their utilities up to date, or realized that they were in a position where they don't have the revenues to keep up their system. But either way, they just said, done. And the more we do this, the more people are going to expect the state to step in and help them. And I'm looking for a long-term, not a guarantee, but pretty close, that they're not going to end up here again. Because poor management's the reason they're here today. And now you're cleaning all this up. What's going to keep them from not being here again down the road?
Respond to that. I mean, the one mechanism, it's not perfect, but is that there is a funding limit for each unit out of the viable utility reserve, and it is interpreted to be a lifetime limit. It's $15 million, which is a lot of money, especially for some really small units. But it does ensure at least that there's a cap at which, when you get out of this program, you better have a plan, or at least the legislature has said this is sort of your last chance for free money to fix your problems and to get that roadmap to what's going to be viable moving forward.
And all that does is take a new legislation down the road, and that'll be fixed.
Yeah. Can't help that.
Secretary Marshall.
Does the statute provide any other remedies beyond the funding? Like, can the statute require consolidation? Can the statute require surrender of the projects?
The way the statute's written, it does not allow that. And we've never, I mean, the division's never taken that kind of really strong role. We have ways to apply pressure. And again, long-term plan is really the mechanism that we have in the statute to say if the numbers don't work, if you can't convince us that the numbers are going to work, then this doesn't fly. And you have to look towards another alternative, which may be consolidation. That's what we have.
And the scoring on the grants encourages regional solutions.
It does.
They get a lot of points for
and
using the money for some sort of regional project.
And the funding limits, I mentioned 15 million per unit. It's actually 30 million if it's 2 or more units consolidating into a single unit. So there's more money available for larger projects.
Go ahead, Mr. Butler.
Is that turning over control to a regionalization board, turning the assets and control and the rate over to a regional board?
That's correct. Yeah, we've had the question of whether just interconnection would, allow the unit to, access that $30 million, and we've jointly agreed that it's not. What is meant by, and the way the statute's written, it clearly says taking 2 or more units and making them one. So that would mean all control, all asset ownership and operation to a single authority or local government.
How long do you project the balance of these funds will service these communities? I mean, if you just taken a look, 2 years, 5 years, 7 years?
Yeah, well, our funding, our application deadline for spring funding, which is the first time we're offering the VETNIS ARPA funds to distressed units or other units, was yesterday, and we are still just logging in applications. So I won't, be a spoiler in terms of how many applications and how much money we've got, but we've got a ton. Way more than the division has ever processed before. So theoretically, we could obligate all of those funds before July, which is when SWE and LGC will probably see those. We would like to retain some of that funding for at least the fall funding round, because we know some units were not able to get applications in because they hadn't, these small units, don't jump right on something or have shovel-ready projects, so they're still doing some of that predecessor work to get their projects to us, because there are certainly some really important projects that we hope to be able to fund. But the long story short is that it's not going to be enough. It's certainly not going to be enough money to fund everything that's needed. How long it'll last, the ARPA funds have to be expended by the end of 2026.
it has to be expended by the end of 2026.
Correct.
This latest allocation, because when the viable utility reserve was first established in, by the General Assembly, it had an additional appropriation of $9 million. This next 400 and some 50 or so million dollars that was appropriated was through VUR funds. So because those are, I'm sorry, through ARPA funds, through the VUR, right? So any of those expenses, deadlines and things like that associated with the ARPA funds sort of flow through as the VUR fund. So when Vic is talking about those deadlines, it's not necessarily VUR deadlines, but by virtue of the fact that the VUR has been funded by ARPA dollars.
Correct. Yeah, that's the federal flow down requirements for that funding source.
Well, had there not been these funding, these grant funds, are you looking, as Secretary Marshall said or stated, are you looking at any permanent ways to address this? I mean, I know you're talking about regionalization, but I'm just talking about these little small communities like the treasurer was in yesterday that are not going to be able to sustain their systems. I mean, Garland, Sarah Gorder, what would you have done if this emergency grant money hadn't been come forward? And how do you think the legislature would react with it? Do you think they'd start asking the urban areas in the state to bail out all the small rural communities?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you, Mr. Butler. I'm sorry. I know as Debbie mentioned, the original allocation for the VUR was $9 million, which, as you know, doesn't go very far for infrastructure. So we had limited that pot of money to doing studies, and we talked about that last year here. So we're starting to see the effect of some of those studies in terms of projects actually coming out. But if it hadn't been for the ARPA funds, the presumption was that the General Assembly would have appropriated additional funding, but I don't know what that process would have been or what their thinking would be there in terms of continued funding going forward or other mechanisms as you're suggesting, Mr. Butler.
All right. Mr. Treasurer, just a question. You're familiar with the marriage between Bethel and Goldsboro? Greenville, excuse me. Yeah, that was a slip. And that was water and sewer, just sewer.
I think it was just on one side. I forget whether it was water or sewer. I was before my time, but
okay. And it's my understanding that there was some pushback to that, and it's my understanding now, in the rearview mirror, that people are getting a higher quality of product for a lower product price. So, you don't work for me, but I would like to direct you to start keeping track of this, because we are going to need examples of successes in order to get more successes. We need to tell people, like in East Laurinburg, you'll always be a community, whether you're a city or not. Because the narrative, it always gets on the other side. We got to show people that losing control of this may mean you end up with better quality product at lower cost. I constantly talk about Hosky versus Spring Lake as two examples of who's doing the right things and who may not be. So I'm asking you, as you move forward, to keep a library of these successes, and no BS, no consultants, no white papers. Don't overthink it. This is what the water and sewer rates were before we did this. This is where they were headed before we did this. This is where they are now. I think it's very important for our relationship for you to put a week or an hour or so a month just toward keeping track of the success stories.
thank you. Yeah, I know you said no consultants. We actually do have a contract with the Environmental Finance Center, UNC, who are working on case studies for, in fact, Bethel and Greenville. So might be a little more, I understand you want something a little, less detailed perhaps, but
What were they paying? What were they getting? What were they going to be paying for what they were getting? And then what are they paying now for what they're getting?
Real simple.
Real simple. So that'd be helpful if you did that. And then, so anyway. And as we were talking before this meeting with staff, so going back to Debbie's explanation of all this, you got to be distressed to get a grant. So being labeled distressed means you get a ticket to the dance. It doesn't mean anybody's going to ask you to dance, right? Because you may not, once you get in the building, you may just be you won't get to dance at all because you don't qualify, you didn't compete well, you didn't whatever. Is that accurate? That's correct. What I
Nobody's
don't
going
want, sorry?
Oh, their dance card's not going to be filled up.
Right. So I'm the least likely person to be talking about this topic on this panel. But anyway, I'm just trying to make sure that when we go out to the public, we can adequately explain this. So I guess what I'm saying finally is that we've all been in situations in our life, whether it's mentally, physically, or spiritually, where we just give up. We get so far behind, we know we can't make up. We know we can't make it up. We know we can't catch up. So we just surrender. And I think going back to how this whole conversation started with Alder Wood is that we just don't want that mentality there where they're incented just to give up. So that's my thoughts on the subject.
And Mr. Treasurer, I'd like to add or suggest or bring awareness, all of these gated communities that are developing down here in rural southeastern North Carolina. I mean, there's one right here in Bladen County called Bay Tree Lake, and they're talking about consolidating Bladenboro, Elizabethtown, White Lake. There's pushback on these developments that are trying to climb as many houses in there as they can. And then they get as better or even a preferential rate for having their wastewater on a pressure line. Look at River Landing in Duplin County. I mean, this is going to be an issue as the housing issue, particularly in our part of the state, is just pushing out of the urban, out of Wilmington, out of Fayetteville, that we're going to have these gated communities that's creating this wastewater and going to expect to get a good deal on somebody handling it.
Right. Okay. Good point.
Other thing, so if you're done with that, let's talk about the UAL. So we don't publish it because we don't want to embarrass anybody.
We don't publish it on our website or anything like that, correct? But we do, as far as the distressed units under VUR, actually that list is available. DEQ actually has a fantastic viable utilities webpage, and so the what's designated as distressed are out there on that website.
But I was going back to the UAL.
But if we get asked for, if we get FOIA.
I know it's public record.
Yeah.
But we don't publish it, so it's available to just anybody. So I'm wondering if there shouldn't be a 2-year clean it up, get yourself straight, because we're going to start publishing. Gives people a chance, 2 years, 24 months, get themselves back on track. But I don't think we should be, people that don't do Spring Lake, that don't do their job, I don't think they should be afforded the luxury of not being published. So again, there are a lot on there. I don't want to embarrass anybody. I want to give them a fighting chance to fix this. But there needs to be some incentive to fix themselves. And I think saying that this thing's going on the website in 2 years might make people stop and think about cleaning up their act. I don't know how much agreement, if any agreement, but I think it's something to be considered.
And Alder Wood speaks a lot about these topics across the state, as I do. And we bring up East Laurinburg, Spring Lake, and very quickly in these conversations, very, very quickly. He knows this as well as I and Secretary Marshall, that the conversation can flip back on us and say, why did you let it go that long? And I got that in Pender County last Tuesday. I got it in Craven County and Edgecombe County yesterday. You could talk about, the work that the auditor's office has done to uncover these things very, very quickly. In any conversation, you can come back and say, why did somebody do something?
Why the LGC let this happen?
Right. And so I think that's sort of what you're.
Yep.
Where are we?
Where is this list?
Failed.
I have not updated yet. I'd love it if it's someplace for any time I want to look at it. Like in, we pull the old on 26.
Huh?
Number 26.
Okay.
Oh, change the number.
Number 25, Spring Lake loan. Thank you, Debbie. Go ahead.
All right, so we talked about this some last month.
Which Spring Lake loan?
This is the fire station loan that Town of Spring Lake got from South River EMC. They should have brought it to the commission for approval and they did not. South River borrowed the money from the North Carolina organization, and they have to pay it back to them regardless of what happens between Spring Lake and South River. The original terms of the loan were 8 years with a 2-year deferral. There's a 1% administration fee.
A year.
That's a year that's capped at $1,000, whichever's less. And Spring Lake was to start making payments this fall. They have offered to extend that out to a 12-year amortization period. And the treasurer has proposed that we take that to a 20-year amortization period. And so staff is asking for direction from the commission as to which way we're going to go on this. Because we are going to run it through the normal process of a local government applying for loan approval. Even though it's after the fact. That's what other units do that drop the ball and don't get their debt approved by the commission, is they have to go through the normal approval process.
Even though we control it, we're going to be the applicant.
We're going to be wearing both hats as the applicant for Spring Lake and as the commission.
Which will involve a public hearing and that type of thing.
Right, we'll have to go through all the things that local governments are required to do anytime they want to borrow money, and
Which should have happened from the get-go.
yes, all of those things, and they may have happened. I don't know. We've not been able to determine if Spring Lake ever actually had a public hearing or not on this line.
Sharon,
So,
Mr. Treasurer,
Yes.
Sharon, who did you say South River got the money from?
From the North Carolina EMC organization.
From the corporate North Carolina Electric Co-op organization.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And when we've been discussing this, then Secretary Marshall, I think it would be reasonable. They financed this for 59 months.
No. That's the other. That's the other line.
I'm sorry. Right. They financed
This
this.
was this is Cindy Aiken. This was 10-year loan with 2-year deferral.
Right. But it's a capital asset.
And
It's
zero
It's
interest.
a fire station.
Correct.
So my proposal is, if you were going to finance it, if anybody came before our agenda to borrow money for a fire station, it'd probably be a 20-year asset. And my proposal, to be reasonable, is to take the 2 years that have already passed, so it basically turns it into an 18-year loan at no interest. So anyway, Secretary Marshall,
Refresh me, what is the amount?
$1 million.
$1 million loan.
1 million. And the public hearing would be conducted in Spring Lake. Yes.
I believe we'd be able to hold that remotely, but you would be acting, the LGC would be acting as the governing board for Spring Lake for that public hearing. So I believe we could offer that remotely, Cindy.
Yes. And we can be flexible as far as the physical location. fair to citizens, but
Except we don't have, we'll figure that out to your point, but we're running short on people and big on things to do.
But I mean,
Yes.
they're the subject of the hearing. Town,
But the LGC is running the town.
right.
So the LGC would act as back to themselves.
Yeah, but the hearing is for who?
Yeah,
Us,
the citizens,
us
you're right.
ourselves?
No,
for
the citizens, you're right.
no, right, public hearing for the public to be notified and make their comments. Then LGC, as the governing board for financial affairs, would be voting on whether to proceed.
And we could probably set it up remotely where our staff could be here and then they could have a remote, public hearing place in Spring Lake.
So, Mr. Treasurer, let me see if I understand this correctly. It's the public body that is in error because they did not come to the LGC to get this loan. The people that loan the money, they don't have any regulatory authority over them. The State Board of Electric Co-ops, they can loan money to whoever they want to under whatever terms they want to. Is that, are y'all finding that to be correct?
I'm not aware of any restriction on what the state organization can or cannot do.
I'm not either, and I've been dealing with them for 50 years. I'm not aware of any restrictions they're under.
Let me see if I can understand this a little bit. Is there a purported lien of any sort on, it was a fire truck, right?
The fire station, yes.
Fire station. Is there any lien or anything on this fire station? Is this a secured, are we dealing with a secured loan, or, I mean, what are we dealing with?
Yeah, this is Cindy. Yes, sir. They have a deed of trust, but by law, it's a void contract because of their failure to get LGC approval.
Because they never got it, so it isn't a valid, whatever it isn't valid. But we would have to. So I'm just trying to figure out, if we didn't approve this, what happens?
Nothing.
Somebody's out of some money somewhere.
Well, there would be, the title insurance company, I'm sure will have some interest in what happens, as well as some attorneys, malpractice insurance carriers, and I don't know how long the North Carolina EMC would be willing to wait to be paid back by the South River EMC. And I believe it was a line of credit is what I believe we were told.
And has has the lender, is the lender agreeing to this in essence 20-year loan with no interest?
This time.
So understanding the lender is up to 12 years, and I think based on the nature of this asset, I went down and looked at this asset last week, that the 20-year loan you're referring to, Secretary Penny, is going to be in effect an 18-year loan because we'll give them the 2 years that's already passed that they should have been making payments that they didn't. So
But we're going to amortize it over 18 years.
Yeah, the floor is 12 years and the ceiling's 18 years. And we feel like that looking at the financials of Spring Lake, because once we cure this, Spring Lake is still upside down. So we gotta make sure that whatever we agree to, if we agree to anything, that we're able to actually make the payments.
Are they upside down before this loan or after this loan?
Both.
Okay.
So
I was going to quote the treasurer a little bit. We didn't cause it, we found it. And our thought was how can we try, do the best we can to make it right? That's just my, I don't vote.
And we got to start out like we're going to hold out in terms of how do we don't want to, you know, we're trying to save Spring Lake, not drown Spring Lake. But we're constantly dealing with issues where people have been trying to drown Spring Lake twice now in 7 years. So, what do you need the board to do here?
We just need direction on. We're gonna be. Do we need to vote? Application. Do we need to vote? What do you think, Cindy?
Well, I was going to move that we send staff back to negotiate a 20-year term on this $1 million.
Yes, but I was saying in the normal course of events, when it's done correctly, the unit comes with their application and the terms are agreed on. They have a commitment letter or whatever we call it, term letter from the lender. So we all have that.
And had they come to us with an 8-year term and we looked at their financials, had they had any? We said no.
Right.
I can't.
Get them out of the situation the best we can. I think we send the staff back to negotiate a 20-year term. Make that motion.
Just to clarify, is that the 20-year loan, but with the treasurer's note earlier that it was 2 years?
Well, I mean, it's yeah, it's a 20-year term, but 2 years doing what it does.
Giving them credit, still start October.
Giving them the credit for the 2 years.
We take
a 20-year loan with 18-year amortization.
There you go. That's it.
Secretary Marshall.
I'm getting advice from my counsel over there that we need to establish an appropriate firewall between the folks who are negotiating this and the body that will be approving it later on, potentially.
Staff will be negotiating it. The commission members will be approving it.
We're just now telling them what to do. So the firewall's already.
Well, it was the best we can.
Won't the lender be approving it? Yeah, I mean.
Well, I mean, but right now, they don't really have much of a leg to stand on. They have no loaf. I mean, they can agree to half a loaf, a 3/4 of a loaf, or zero loaf. Really?
Because if we don't approve this, the contract is void, and the situation now resides between.
Somebody will have to spend money through legal fees, I guess, in order to try to get some other party to make them whole.
But it's the state CM,
Yeah,
whatever,
yes,
and it's the Eastern, and Spring Lake's really out of it because the thing's void.
Correct.
Then there would be no legal way we could make a debt service payment without an approved.
Right.
Complicated by the fact that the county of Cumberland or the city of Fayetteville is making some in-kind payments toward getting fire service to this community. So that's a little bit of a complicated factor.
Would it be correct to say this is an unprecedented situation for the LGC?
Yeah. That'd be an understatement.
It's not unprecedented that this group has approved, oops, we made a mistake and gone after the fact to approve them, but you weren't in control of the unit.
I agree with what Alderwood said. However, Secretary Marshall is comfortable with getting this to that point, then let's do that.
What would that be, Secretary Marshall? I mean, how can we, everybody win?
Mr. Treasurer, let me just make members of the board. We've got another source of money. It's just like a bank. The state, the 26 electric co-ops in the state. They didn't do anything wrong. The municipality didn't follow the statutes in applying for a loan. Maybe we should consider approaching the state EMC organization, telling them how grateful we are for supporting these rural areas and these communities, and that in the state of North Carolina, public bodies have to go through the LGC for approval, which would help ensure they'd get paid back. And that is so if a unit asked them in Albemarle or wherever across the state, the local co-op then would say, well, we'll act as a bank. You go before the LGC, go through the process of applying for a loan, and we'll be the bank and make the loan. And we were just talking earlier about the needs for infrastructure in these small rural communities. I think, sir, we need to remember they won't sell electricity in these small communities. And if we don't have water and sewer flowing in these small communities, it's going to be to their detriment. So I would suggest we try to have some approach with the statewide level, because the co-ops are well thought of in the state of North Carolina. And we're grateful they're ready to loan money for these types of projects. But they need to, when a community comes to them, say, start through the LGC, because it very well is going to come a day when we're going to need them to step up and help fund some of these water and sewer systems we're talking about. That's just an observation.
So let's move, we've got to move this on. So
I would say not have a motion
okay.
and let staff go negotiate with the South River Electric membership. And if that means negotiating with the state body, also negotiate the best deal, have a hearing on the best deal, and come back to the LGC in our official capacity without us micromanaging that.
Okay. All right. Enough said. Okay. Anything else? All right. Members, thank you. Thank you all.
Absolutely.
We're finishing our agenda here, and just hang with us one more moment. I think that's it. Any board members have anything they'd like to add? Okay. I will schedule, talk about electioneering and some of the interest we're getting. So just want to make everybody aware of that. Councilwoman Hoffman, I know it's kind of putting you on the spot, but I'd say you're as close to Carolyn Coleman as anyone on the call today. So any little comments you'd like to make regarding her service or legacy to Guilford County would be appreciated.
Certainly. Thank you very much. Carolyn was a real powerhouse and made a huge difference during her lifetime. I served with her on our Convention and Visitors Bureau board for several years, and she's great. She will be greatly missed, and her legacy is something that we all like to emulate, I'm sure. So thank you very much for honoring her today. I appreciate that.
I would like to say something too.
Yes, sir.
I first met Carolyn as a associate general counsel for the North Carolina Conference of Branches, the NAACP, and she was the executive director of the NAACP. A tireless worker for the community, and always stuck to her values, and did not let her self-interest interfere with what she saw to be best for the community. I then worked with her when I was state personnel director, and she was advisor to Governor Hunt, serving in Governor Hunt's cabinet. And again, it was the same person. She, and I remember the last time seeing her, she was receiving the North Carolina Awards, and I had the honor of pushing her across the stage as she was in her wheelchair. And I have never seen a more dignified person as she gave her speech sitting down and causing all of us to stand up. So it is an honor to honor her today.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilwoman Hoffman, obviously it's a big state. Does she have a daughter that's in public service, public government?
I'm not sure. She obviously has a daughter, and I'm not sure about about her work at this point. Her granddaughter has actually appeared before us a couple of times in our council meetings over the last several months as we did a resolution to honor Mrs. Coleman. So sorry, I don't have better information about her daughter.
That's okay. Well, thank you for those comments. I'll entertain Councilwoman Hoffman's remarks as a motion to adjourn, and Secretary Penny's remarks as a second to that motion. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Auditor Woodhead to leave. She's absent. Secretary Marshall? Aye. Thank you. Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Senator Falwell?
Aye.
Thank you.
We're hereby adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.